What's happening, Boot Junkies? Mike Dog Audio here, back with another video on home studio recording and voiceover. I got an email the other day from one of our fellow booth junkies, and she's a voice actor who typically works in a studio and is recording now at home, and got a request from one of her engineers to provide a file in a way that she's never done before. So she asked me for some help, and I thought it would actually be a good example of the kinds of requests that you can get from a sound engineer and why it helps to know your DAW. So she's a Reaper user. I'm a Reaper user, and so we're going to show how to do this particular request in Reaper. But this is why it pays to study your DAW, because once you learn how to do this stuff, you're able to handle more and more unusual requests from the sound engineer. So the request from the engineer says, can you please supply a stereo file? Now, normally we supply mono files from our single microphone. You should be supplying mono files. Don't send stereo for a single mic recording, because then you're just sending twice as much data as you need. The requirements are this. On the left channel, he or she wants the original untreated voice normalized to -3 dBFS. On the right channel, they want the same identical voice recording, also normalized to -3 dBFS, but with whatever the typical vocal processing is, your typical vocal chain. So if it's debreathing or de-essing or compression limiting, whatever it is that you do, he wants to hear that side also. So let's start. So when we're using Reaper, we record raw into the DAW, and then we can do all of our processing after the fact. So let's take a look at the screen. And I have recorded just a basic, just a couple of sentences that we're going to use for our example. This is a recording we're going to use to show how to normalize and then process according to the sound engineer's specifications. Okay, so I intentionally made that nice and quiet so you can see it's not a very big waveform here. So the first thing we're going to want to do is to normalize it. So first let's disarm this track so we don't get any more from the microphone by accident. And the first thing we'll do is we're going to normalize. Let's normalize this track since we know that both of them need to be normalized. So let's right click and look for item processing and choose normalize items. So let's just take a brief detour and talk about what normalization is. What normalization does is it looks for the highest peak in that file, and it will raise that highest peak all the way up to 0 dBFS, which is the maximum loudness of your file. Think of your files as your file level is like being your level underwater, right? If you're a submarine, you can get no higher than 0 feet at sea level, right? Because you're that's the top, that's your ceiling, but you can go down, 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 down all the way to the bottom, infinitely down to the bottom of the ocean or whatever. DBFS just means it's relative to the full scale. The full scale means 0 at the top. 0 is up here. And so normalization takes the highest peak and raises it all the way to 0, and then just raises everything else. It just amplifies everything out by whatever that amount is. It's just a straight linear amplification of that gain. And so, but now that's too loud, right? Because the engineer said he wants it to -3 dBFS, -3 from the full scale. Luckily, that's super easy to do in Reaper. So if you select the item in Reaper at the very top, we'll see that you get the little arrow with the line, and all you do is you reduce it, and you can reduce it by -3 dB. So right there. So now we've normalized our raw track to -3 dBFS. The last thing that we need to do is we need to put this track on the left side of a stereo pair. So we'll go over to the pan knob here in Reaper, and we will pan it hard left, 100% to the left. Easy. We've now met all the requirements, I think. Let's see, the original untreated voice recording normalized to -3 dBFS on the left. So we've met all of the requirements of the first set of requirements that the engineer gave us. So now we can do the second half, the right channel. So he wants to hear what our vocal chain sounds like. So here's how we do that. We select the item in Reaper. Let's make it nice and big. We hold down Command, and our mouse cursor changes to the plus, and we're going to drag straight down. And it duplicated, made a new track for us, and duplicated that item for us. So it duplicated our recording. The new track needs to be panned hard right? We need that to be on the right-hand side, so we're going to pan that hard right all the way over to the right. And we can add our vocal chain to it. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that it's a great idea that once you have your vocal booth dialed in, you should set up your default vocal chain of the processes that you would add to make your voice, your recording sound as good as they can. It's typically adding a gate, adding an EQ, adding compression if you need it, if you tend to vary quite a bit. You'd have your typical vocal chain. That is your post-processing chain. And so we'll go into Reaper, and right now we need to just add that. So I'll click the FX button here on that second track, right-click in the right pane, and add from the FX chains. I will load my default FX chain. So I have one right here called my VO chain. I'll add that, and you can see it adds, pardon me, it adds all of the FX in the order that I prefer to have them. Now, for the purposes of making it so that we can hear this on the thing, you probably won't hear much of a difference between the two recordings if I just leave it like this. So let's add one more crazy process to our vocal chain so that you can really hear that one sounds totally different from the other. So the easiest way I know to do that is to just pitch shift it down 1 octave. It'll become unintelligible, but you'll be able to see that the left is the original and the right is the processed chain. So on my right hand chain, I've added a pitch shift down by 1 octave. Let's see how it sounds. We should hear, when I hit play, we should hear 2 tracks, the original on the left, the modified on the right, and we're going to hear them both at the same time. This is a recording we're going to use to show how to normalize. Here we go. Let's just solo each. So on the left, we'll hear the original. This is a recording we're going to use to show how to and on the right, we'll solo that, and this is the modified, the post-processed version.
This is a recording we're going to use to show how to...
It's got that pitch shifter, so it moved it down 1 whole octave. It's really deep. So now the last thing we need to do is we need to render this final file and send it to the engineer. So the last thing we'll do is we'll do a render. File, render. We'll make sure that we're in WAV format. He's going to want it in its original format. He doesn't say... And then you give it a name. So this will be my final stereo mix. Okay, so we'll click render, and we now see that it has rendered to a stereo file. Let's show it. And then what I'll do is I'll drag that file back into Reaper so that we can see it. So we can see now we have the mix, the final stereo. We can see both channels are there. And this would be the file, this WAV file would be what we send to the engineer. So normalization raises everything to 0, and then you can back it down. dBFS means the dB rate on the full scale, so it's going to be a negative number relative to 0. 0 being the loudest your file can be before it starts to clip. And then we panned it left and right, and then we have our final output. So, Booth Junkie who sent that in, I hope that helps for everybody else. Now we know about normalization, and now go record something, normalize it, and make it amazing. because I know you can.